Right. Well, welcome back. 10 weeks we've had with no show. So come back with a bang. I think we've got a really amazing group of people today who are coming together. So I'm Richard Chaplin, and I'm really happy to be with you today. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, there's an amazing panel of people who are going to be coming to talk to us today. I've got Vineet Nayar, who is the founder chairman of Sampark Foundation and the former vice chairman and CEO of HCL Technologies. And he's talking today about frugal innovation. Kate Lai is the founder and managing director of KLI Consulting, and she is talking about overcoming barriers to strategy execution. Francesca Lagerberg, the global leader of network capabilities for Thornton. And finally, Jeremy Beard, the managing partner of Haysmacintyre. Before we get into the show proper, let's just kind of reflect on some of the things that are going on in the forum at the moment. If you hadn't seen the summit, we had a summit, if you recall, in June, and there was some great feedback, and the videos are available for you on that summit. So please watch, please go to Retuning Your Firm and you can watch them. Lots of people are watching the videos from past episodes, and somebody asked me, what are the key topics? And there seem to be around strategy, non-exec directors, quite a lot on marketing. There's a pretty big range, to be perfectly honest. Peer groups. Peer groups are going really, really well for the forum. We've had 100% renewal this year, which was absolutely amazing. And we've got them for firm-wide leaders, for COOs, and also for HR directors. And there's some new groups starting up this autumn, which is really exciting. You may remember we were working last year on a fast-track innovation framework to try and actually help people when they were confronting business challenges or opportunities. And that's really moved forward a lot over the summer. And it's gone into a guide, which is going to be available for free very shortly. And also, if people are interested, into bespoke sprints. And the show is now running, fortnightly. And then lastly is the networking clubs. Now, the networking clubs will be available shortly, and I really encourage you to go for the one that we've set up for you on that particular space. The feedback from UK government. Now, as you know, government may be very busy, but we were really impressed when they sent this feedback to us about our poll results being incredibly valuable in these dynamic times. So I just really wanted to run through very quickly the poll that we conducted last July, 9th of July, that was the last episode. And what was quite interesting there, we asked a very simple question around what was the impact of lockdown on your firm? Was it positive or was it negative? And we had 41% who saw it as positive and 41% who viewed it as negative. And 18%, whatever the difference is, were kind of in the middle. Which is kind of binary in a way. Now, we're going to ask you the same question shortly. So we'll see whether now, 2 months after lockdowns been raised, we will find a different answer. Those who were apprehensive about returning to the office still exceeded those who were relaxed, but many more were neutral than in April. But again, overall, still people were fairly apprehensive. 2 months on, is that still the case? We're talking a lot about people today. Happiness levels have reduced, and more people have had mental health issues during the lockdown. Conflict levels are about the same, people are saying. So it hasn't escalated into conflict, but people have had certainly more challenges than possibly before. Probably a little bit of a historical one now, but less than 5% of people were self-isolating. That was in the pingdemic days. You may remember them if you're in the UK. Physical changes to the office were mostly modest. We had a lot of people on the show who'd say we were going to be changing this and changing that. And actually, when it came down to it, most people didn't seem to have changed very much. Working hours when people are in the office are made more flexible to help people avoid commuting and that sort of thing. And this is a really interesting stat. And this, again, remember, was on the 9th of July, before the lockdown was lifted on the 19th, if I recall. Over 70% are expecting further lockdowns. And I'm going to ask you that question again in a minute, because it's quite interesting, because as we all know, the number of cases is kind of not insignificant, 30 to 40,000 a day. The deaths are over 100, nudging towards 200. And that's about the same numbers that were caused the lockdown in November of last year. So let's just see what happens on that one. So I'm going to basically now ask you to complete today's poll, and would like to basically invite you to ask some questions which cover the following. What is the general mood post-lockdown and being back in the office? Have things changed? Now you're sort of 2 months after that particular change. Self-isolating, is that still low? To what extent have you carried out work on your office? Are there flexibilities in working hours? What's been the overall impact? Have there been changes in the happiness, mental health and conflict since the end of lockdown? Have things improved or got worse? And do you think lockdown is going to be imposed in the next year? Okay, the first question. What is the general mood now that the lockdown restrictions have been lifted? We've got 5% elation, 32% are on one step down, 64% neutral in the middle. No panic, no negatives. So overall positive. So that's something. Moving on, the general mood over being back in the office. Yeah, neutral, relaxed is now in ahead of apprehensive. That's the first time in 18 months that's been the case. So maybe the return to the office wasn't quite such a concern when it came to it as we thought it would be in advance. In terms of self-isolating, I think as I expected, 18% nobody, 73% less than 5%. So that's not an issue for management about people being isolated, which is as one possibly would have expected. Changes to the office, again, modest changes are the key driver there, 60%, no changes 5%, completely redesigned about 10%, significant changes 18%. So about 30% of you have done something significant, the others have chosen not to. In terms of flexibility of working hours, we're starting more into the people questions now. Greater flexibility in working hours when you're in the office, absolutely. That's a 55%, 32% to some extent, only 5% not at all. And there's a 10% or so of you who actually are all working from home, which is now, I think, an option that probably wouldn't have been there the last time 18 months ago. So what's the overall assessment of the impact of the lockdown on your firm? Well, on this occasion, last time I looked, it was positive 41. Now it's negative 41, most people neutral. So I think, and again, it's probably some of you will have done this, I know, because we've got a very regular studio audience. So clearly the positive stuff has faded a bit. Now people are beginning to actually think about the real impact that it's had. So that's, I think, quite interesting in itself. In terms of happiness, yep, that's gone up. 64% have seen an increase in happiness since people came back into the office, and 20-odd% have seen a reduction in happiness. And the people in terms of modest, interesting here actually, about the same on mental health, but actually 37% have seen an increase in mental health. I hope that was the way they read the question, but that was the way they've answered it anyway. So that was perhaps a bit surprising. Conflict, not much difference, slight increase, possibly when people are now seeing each other and can't hide behind the Zoom screens anymore, who knows? And lastly, do you think that lockdown restrictions will be reimposed? And north of 70% of you saying that's likely. So that hasn't changed either. So yeah, we're still in the situation where we feel we're still not out of the storm, but we're in the storm. But some things have changed. But okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. So thank you for completing that poll. And I'm now going to invite our first speaker, Vineet, to come and share some thoughts on frugal innovation. Over to you, sir.
And happy to share my thoughts on frugal innovation on an experiment we are conducting in India. After HCL Technologies, I started Sampark Foundation with my wife. And the problem we faced, the design thinking problem we faced in India was the fact that we had about 760,000 schools and 100 million children in government schools studying in these schools. Most of the recent assessments done on learning outcomes show that these children cannot read in grade 5 numbers beyond 99 or construct simple sentences in their local language. The learning outcome of these 100 million children in these 760,000 schools is very, very alarmingly poor. And the demographic dividend of India potentially can turn into its biggest challenge. It is its biggest challenge. So me and my wife Anupma decided that we're going to focus on this problem and try and solve it if we can. There were two issues with it. Number one, the scale and size of the problem is very large. And therefore, anything you bring to the table to try and transform, which is change the form of the outcomes, has to be at that size and scale. And therefore, the amount of resources which is needed is very, very large. Number two, we have to work with the government because most of these are government schools. So that is why the birth of frugal innovation really came in terms of if we wish to solve this problem, it has to be innovatively, a catalyst action which will transform the classroom. And number two, it has to be extremely frugal. So in our design thinking assumption, we put $1 a child per annum as a constraint and saying anything which we design has to not exceed $1 per child per annum, because that is the only way we would be able to reach these hundreds of millions of children. So having done that, then we started asking the same questions which I asked myself in HCL Technologies when we created Employees First, Customers Second as a cultural transformation agenda, which resulted into a 6x growth in revenues and profitability and market cap for HCL Technologies. The first question, where does learning outcome get created? The answer, it gets created in the interface of the child and the teacher. The second is, who creates the learning outcome? The answer is the teacher. And therefore, what should Sampark Foundation and the government collaboratively do to try and impact the learning outcome and to improve it? And the answer is enthuse, encourage, enable the teachers to be able to create the magic in the classroom to be able to create the learning outcome transformation which we see. Now, the statement is big. How do we execute it? How do we come up with one single idea which potentially can make that happen? And we were inspired by Bollywood. If you go to a village and you see a Bollywood movie, you would see that on a Saturday, people will forget their hunger, people will forget their sickness, people will forget whatever it is and put bamboos and have an immersive experience of Bollywood movies in their village. So the question was, can we learn from Bollywood and bring that into the classroom and unlock the magic of Bollywood inside the classroom and ignite the classroom and create significant amount of enthusiasm in the classroom so that there is fun, there is song, there is dance, and therefore the learning outcome will begin. But the second problem was there is hardly any electricity in most of these schools. And therefore you cannot take technology other than the fact there is a constraint on frugality. And how do you get device which does not use electricity? So we came up with audio device and saying, can we create an audio device with long lasting battery life, which we can charge with a dynamo of a cycle and put a lot of songs and dance in it and create a virtual character like Mary Poppins, who we call Sampark Didi, who teaches maths and English using that audio box. We did that. We took that into the school, and suddenly the school exploded with excitement. The children exploded with excitement when Sampark Didi started, like Mary Poppins, started saying, "Good morning, children. How are you today? We're going to have some songs and dance today." Similar innovation we started creating in the interface of the child and the teacher, like the audio box in Sampark Didi, 17 other innovations to try and ignite the classroom transaction. Today, we are in 84,000 schools across 6 states in India. We touch the lives of 10 million children. We hope to touch the lives of 20 million children by rolling out this program in 200,000 schools in the next 3 years. And the learning outcome have increased between 30 to 50%, depending on which state you are. The central idea to this is that any transformation, which will change the form of something permanently, needs creative innovation, but at a frugal level because the scale is large. And when there are environments where the resource constraints are very, very critical in design thinking, that is the time you have to be more innovative and more frugal. And that is what our attempt in Sampark Foundation is. Thank you so much.
I think all of us are humbled by that story. I mean, but equally, I think the story, we'll come back to it later, I'm sure, but the role of the leader or the teacher in your case is fundamental, and it'd be interesting to hear how many managing partners, I'm not saying see themselves as Mary Poppins, that's probably a bit extreme, but you know where I'm coming from. So I'll now invite our second guest, is Kate Lai, and Kate's coming to talk about, again, a very similar topic in a way, but you've got a great strategy, you've designed it, you've gone away, you've thought about it, you've come up with something that everybody's signed into. whoops, what next? How do you actually execute that strategy, and what are the barriers, and how might you overcome them?
So my work is all about building a stronger connection between strategy and leadership. And I'm sure many of you, as we reach this next stage of the pandemic, are thinking about your marketplace and how it's changed, and how your clients' expectations have changed, and your resources, and where you need to be placing bets for the future. And so whether you are doing a strategy review or a refresh, I would say before you sort of say, great, we've done it, we can get on with it, most businesses do really need to pause and think about, what actually is the behavioural change you're trying to make here, and what's the gap between where we are today and where we need to be in the future. And I think lots of businesses rush into believing sort of they've got the strategy, therefore they have the blueprint for how to operationalize it. And I think a great question businesses need to ask is what needs to be true for this strategy to deliver. If we look at where we are today versus where we're saying our strategy needs to take us, what's going to be the difference either in funding, in use of resources, in behaviours, in skills capabilities? What are some of those changes we need to go about and make? And I think generally they can fall into three categories. What is it with this strategy we need to learn? And unless we learn, we can't deliver it. Really quite challenging question. What is it we need to build or develop? And what do we already have? But actually, to be consistent, we need to align it with this strategy. And I really think that these three questions need to be looked at in a reflective and discursive way through the lens of organisation, leadership and individual, to really sort of tease out the nuance of what it's going to take to be successful here. And making the assumption that smart and well-intentioned people can translate your strategy into action is generally misguided in my experience. Let me give you a real-life example of that. Big pharma company, McKinsey-led strategy review, their big aha was that their R&D function wasn't going to be able to create the volume of blockbusters and new molecules required for the business. And that actually they were going to have to collaborate, go outside, buy new companies, work with biotechs, work with universities to actually have the pipeline that they needed. Now, there was so much enthusiasm with the R&D leadership around that they didn't pause and do the translation. And I have to say, probably for about 2 or 3 months, there was complete chaos where you had leaders running around at conferences or with existing partners talking about potential deals. When we did actually stop and say, let us do this sort of gap analysis, this how are we going to look at the here we are now to where we need to be, it was very, very helpful in terms of saying we've got 3 big gaps here. One is we need to change the culture around not invented here. We need to be open to wherever it's invented. It's helpful to get this drug to patients. We need to make a shift in how we work in terms of, we need to have blended teams. They won't just be people from this company. And thirdly, we need to supplement or develop our commercial expertise of our R&D leaders. And it was only through really articulating those big shifts they needed to make that we could put a plan around it. And so I really would sort of say to you, as you're thinking about your strategic bets for the future, understand what you need to learn, understand what you need to build, understand what you need to align, and do that work, that translation work, to really have a good chance of turning your strategy into reality.
Over to Francesca. Now, we've had a little bit about the leader as Mary Poppins. Well, that was my quick analogy. And then making sure you've got some joined up thinking between the now and where you want to be, because otherwise your plan will fall over. But what were the key themes that you took away from today?
Well, I'm still a little bit in awe about Vineet's explanation of what he's been doing in India. You made that sound so casual, and then sort of knocked us all out with 20 million children could potentially benefit from that. Maybe if I just take some of that thinking, because design thinking is such a helpful way for those of us working in professional services, trying to evolve some existing things on. Design thinking is such a useful tool to have. But frugal innovation, that just love that. That really resonates. And I expect all of us think that we're having to be a little bit frugal in our innovation from time to time. There's something there about the ability to innovate, even when you've got restrictions. And those restrictions could be pandemic, they could be just resources, they could be about the reality today where getting talent, really important talent, into your business is quite hard. So there's an awful lot for us to take away from that thinking. How can we think a little bit differently? So really resonated with that. And also in terms of execution and strategy, gosh, you know what? I've been involved in so many strategies over the years. I've been involved in really good ones and ones that maybe weren't so great. But the ones that were really good was because we actually did something. I've seen some beautiful strategies that sit on a page, and execution and thinking that through is very powerful. And I remember talking to somebody not so long ago who was saying the most beautiful strategy is a waste of space if you decide not to do any of it. So 3 or 4 really key things executed on well is hugely, hugely impactful. So those are the things that stood out for me today, Richard.
Jeremy, welcome back after your, we all had a break, I think. And we've heard from Vineet around how the role of the leader can be inspirational in changing attitudes around Bollywood, whether Haysmacintyre will ever turn into Bollywood, I'm not sure. And then Kate's given us some very clear steers around don't just think, but actually deliver. So what are your thoughts on what you've heard today?
Yeah, thanks, Richard, and good morning, everyone. Great to be back. And back in the office, indeed, I am. So, which is also very good news. Yeah, very interesting, and thank you to Vineet and Kate for their contributions this morning. Certainly, from our point of view, the whole people, talent, war for talent that Francesca alluded to, and the training and development of those individuals over the next 3 or 4 years is vital for us and is a key part of our strategy. We're looking at that at the moment, and in terms of leadership, creating leaders throughout the business. I think it's not just about leaders at the top, but creating teams within the business that work together, that are well led, and so on and so forth. I think the biggest challenge for us in that sort of strategy at the moment is the skills and behavior piece that Kate alluded to. I think, dealing with partnerships, it is sometimes quite challenging to change behaviors. And certainly when we're of a particular size at the moment, and I've probably mentioned on this forum before, I think we are transitioning from a big small firm to a small big firm, and that brings some real behavioral challenges and changes, as well as I think the whole profession is going to go through a change over the next few years, which will require changes in skill set and the way in which people operate. So there was an awful lot for me to take away this morning around that training and development piece. Yeah, and I like Vineet's piece about how to ensure we get some proper return on investment. How can we maximize that training and development for our people with the spend that we have allocated towards that. And so some really interesting points.
Vineet, if I can perhaps bring you in here, I'm just picking up the point that Jeremy was talking about around, in his case, moving from a big small firm to a small big firm, if I can paraphrase. To what extent do you think leadership style needs to change when a firm is going through that sort of a transition?
I think leadership style needs to change dramatically, irrespective of the transition a firm is making, because most of the leadership style we have seen was born in the industrial age, and where the word manager was born. And management practices of aligning people in rows and columns and pyramid structures and hierarchy structures and leader the God and God speak and everybody else follows, are all what I call manufacturing era management philosophies. And most of these books written at that particular time were appraisal systems, annual appraisal systems, promotion, designation, all that stuff is that era. With the digital era dominating and innovation, digital innovation impacting the scale of transformation by 10 times over, the pyramid structures are dead, organizations have become flat, everybody has an equal voice, and therefore the manager is no more needed and a leader is born. A leader is a person who can inspire, enthuse, encourage the employees to get the best version of themselves, and therefore a leader who can increase the clock speed of the organization so that everybody does more. So whenever an organization is transitioning, as you mentioned in this particular case, I think the management philosophy of the organization has to dramatically change from counting value to creating value, from managing people to inspiring people. And therefore, when you look at a leader who would be able to make your organization grow, you're looking at a person who has a management style which caters to the new paradigm shift so that you can attract the best. And once you attract the best, then they are giving the best. And once they're giving the best, they feel they are part of the whole and they are not an employee anymore. So the eras of employees are over. The eras of God CEOs or God leaders is over. The era of equal sets of people is where we are today.
And Kate, just kind of picking up that point around managers, I'll try and reframe it as I can, but the sort of between leaders and managers, the key is to inspire rather than to come up with prescriptive rules and the rest. How do you build inspiration into your work with going through the sort of change programs that you're familiar with?
Yeah, and I think, Richard, it's very telling. I think McKinsey did a poll earlier in the year about what were the leadership development priorities for companies, and developing more inspiring leaders was the top of that. And I think the conversation I always have is about what is the real value add of leadership given where the business is today versus what you have traditionally done, which is somewhat to what Vineet was talking about. Where are the different scenarios where leadership really earns its pay, and what are the things which you're just still in rote mode because you've always done that in the past. So I do think it's rethinking it about where leadership adds value, but very much within the frame of what you're trying to do, because that looks very different from one business to another, in my experience.
Francesca, you deal with many leaders across the world in all the different countries across the Grant Thornton network. And I mean, to what extent is it contextual? To what extent do you feel that actually there are certain skills that can be shared and then people can actually build on?
I think there's undoubtedly some commonality. I do agree that the kind of myth of the charismatic leader is a little bit distracting, because some of the great leaders that I've had the privilege to see and work with wouldn't necessarily tick the charismatic box, but they're just incredibly empathic, thoughtful, flexible, have things that they can offer in terms of really understanding their people and thinking ahead. And they certainly don't, they're very often very humble. I think that's another very strong quality. That there are undoubtedly some cultural differences, different environments. Some are high touch, some are low touch, some are very hierarchical, some have no hierarchy at all. But I think there's an intriguing globalization of some of those leadership trends, because you begin to see certain things that work wherever you're at. And I think empathy would be top of my list of things that you're seeing come through. And that sounds like a soft item, but it's a really hard item. To be truly empathic, to live, breathe, and use that in the way that you operate is actually a real skill. There's been a lot of recent research showing also the rise of the empathic leader as being a successful way to go into the modern volatile world that we live in. So there's something there that's quite intriguing. And if you go way back into the terrible days of control and directive leadership, which I think many of us may have endured when we were starting off in our profession, you only need to sort of look now at the kind of leadership that you do on the whole see and go how much things have improved. Because I think the leadership style today, on the whole, is far more impressive than some of the things I saw when I was starting out in tax all those years ago.
Oh, a mere 5 minutes, we all know that. I'm just really reflecting on that, because there's some really interesting research, which I suppose I would basically call fake it to make it. In other words, if you have the chance to start all over and select a group of leaders who tick certain boxes, that's great. But the reality is, it doesn't work that way. You have a relatively small pool, usually of partners. There's very few managing partners that I aware are in any sort of transfer market between firms. They tend not to do that. And actually, as a result, you probably therefore are in a situation where you may feel that you need to be inauthentic in order to grow to an empathetic place. I won't put Jeremy on the spot completely on that one, because it's not fair, but do you have any kind of thoughts as to around how you've managed to adapt your style, or whether you just feel being yourself as you are with skill, going back to what Gareth Jones said when he spoke on this, late Gareth Jones, it is sufficient? Where do you feel on that agenda?
I've certainly learned a lot in the last 2 years, and I've certainly changed some of the ways that I've dealt with things as a result. But I think I've been authentic. I think I've tried to continue my own beliefs and my own thoughts. But certainly, yes, I have had to adapt and change certain things to try and be more effective. I think there was a couple of things that just came out as well that I touch on. Shared skills and the role of the leader. I think we're looking at that at the moment, and as I say, trying to develop leaders across the business. And it's so important in that regard to have we believe, to have face-to-face contact. We've missed so much by not being in the office, and a lot of those soft skills that we talk about, that people see, can build on, those conversations you have in the cafe or whatever, we've just lost those over the last 18 months or so. And there's some really important things there around, having the leaders of the business visible in the office for other people to learn from. And it's not about technical skill or anything about that. That's quite easy to implement, really. But it's that softer, dealing with people, dealing with clients, etc. that has been missing, and is really valuable, and a key part of us being pushing to be back in the office. We're very much on a hybrid model, looking at people generally being in the office 2 or 3 days a week, apart from our trainees, who we would expect to be in more often. But we've got people who've been with us now almost 2 years, straight out of university, who would be ready to be going onto a client site to lead a team, who are nervous. They've never been in that situation. It's always been remote and done by Teams or Zoom, etc. And they're very nervous about that first situation. And that when you hear that really demonstrates the lack, the problem that has been caused by lack of physically being present together and learning from one another. So I think that's a really key piece for us. I like the talk about inspiring people rather than managing people. We're very fortunate I guess, as a firm and in our profession, that we are able to recruit a wide variety of people, but all have a very high quality. So we have to empower them, give them the opportunity to develop themselves within the framework of our business, and for them to feel part of the business. And it's important that we do that without sort of managing them too strictly. So that's a very, very important part for us as well.
Vineet, if we can perhaps explore a bit further, we talked, I think, of maybe, I won't say the leader as sort of Leo Coker, but inevitably in any organization, in your case, all the multiple schools that you're dealing with, there will be many, many people who need to take on a leadership role. in order to make sure they press the audio at the right time, if something simple like that, but more importantly, obviously when dealing with the kids as teachers. I mean, how do you actually go about inspiring the teachers? I'd be interested to hear about that, because that's very similar in a way to somebody in a professional firm inspiring their middle managers.
Right. So let me start with HCL Technologies and then go to this in two environments which are very radically different. One, a corporate transformation environment, a company which is $10 billion in size with 200,000 employees, and another is 200,000 teachers who are not employees, but are government staff. Motivation level of both these sets of people is extremely different. Teachers are hugely demotivated, disinterested, not interested in at all in any transformation exercise which is happening. The employees are semi-motivated, not aligned with the organization, but semi-motivated. So the answer in HCL Technology was the fact that if there is one leader and one direction, we will fail, because the true value is created in the interface of the client and our employee. So the organization pyramid has to be inverted. So that the management is accountable to the employee as much as the employee is accountable to the management. And the role of management is to enthuse, encourage, enable the employees and increase his clock speed. And that is what we call the employees first, customer second. That the role of managers and management can be nothing but employees first, enthusing, encouraging, enabling them. And that really worked. As I told you, we grew 6 times in 5 years. And that really happened because there was no one leader, and every single person in the organization decided to be leader because they felt they're part of a great transformation exercise. And we've seen that in sports team, we've seen that in many other transformation exercises. But when you go to Sampark Foundation, where we are working with 200,000 teachers today, and they are completely, they are not employees. Number two, they don't buy into what the government is attempting to do, different levels of motivation. The salary structures are poor, training is poor. The question is, how can we inspire them? And the way we decided we're going to inspire them is by inculcating the desire to be loved, the desire to be respected, the desire to be recognized. And therefore, in that interface between the child and the teacher, we created the sense of pride of being a teacher. And that's what our whole training program is. That how to teach maths and how to teach English will come later. But can we first excite you? Can we inspire you of the kind of the work which you're doing with the children is something you should be extremely proud of. And instead of looking for recognition from top down, from government office or external parties, why don't you look for recognition in the eyes of the child, into the laughter of the child, into the good morning ma'am of the child? And that transformation, when we do this transformational training exercise, which lasts for about 3 days, of searching for pride and happiness in the eyes of the child, that transforms the child. And therefore, the teacher becomes a leader. And we are so far away from the child. And therefore, it is very important to make these 200,000 teachers to be leaders. So initially, maybe only 10,000 become leaders. And once they become leaders, then the others get influenced. And therefore, it becomes a waterfall model of more and more people getting adopted. So I would say, depending on the environment which you have to find different strategies. But the constant factor here is that whether it is employees first or teachers first, you have to inspire many, many leaders. That is the only way you will succeed as an organization. Otherwise, you're doomed.
Yeah, doomed is a strong word, isn't it? That's great. Kate, we've had a question about learning and in particular how that works. I appreciate you've answered it in the chat. But would you like just to expand a little bit about the learning? Because in a way, Vineet is talking also about a learning experience in terms of sharing that inspiration with the teachers and the managers in his firms.
And I would say, if you think you don't have to learn anything as a result of sort of your strategic bets, I'd be really worried you sort of haven't got to the bottom of it. In the example I gave, the pharmaceutical company, they really had to help their R&D leaders learn not just to be experts in science and leading science, but also to couple that with a commercial mindset. And some of them could do that and some of them couldn't. But I think the other learning they had to do was they had to learn as a business to run blended teams. So they had to learn to work in different ways with colleagues from universities or from biotech organizations. That for them was very challenging because it required almost, to Jeremy's point, much looser sort of constrictions around, we're empowering people to find a way to make this work. But I also think there was a learning about what is value, how do we create value here. It's not about we invented it here and we bring it through. Value is about we will find any way to bring any promising drug to a patient that needs it. So I think learning on multiple levels there.
Let's just pick up now with Francesca and perhaps talk about the learning and some of the issues that Vineet, coaching, I think, is a word that you've certainly suggested is the role of the leader as a coaching one. But there is some Daniel Goleman research which says that, again, it can be contextual, that there are times when a coaching style is appropriate, but there are other times when, using a graphic example, the nuclear power station is about to explode, then asking questions may not be the right time to do it, but you need to tell people what needs to be done. So what's been your experience around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about flexibility and context and what the issues at hand. As you say, if there's a burning building, you don't coach someone how to get out. You just grab them and throw them out the door. But in a day-to-day business environment, I mean, coaching, as you know, I'm a huge fan. It's just a massively impactful way of encouraging people to learn without being told exactly what to do every step of the way. And I think in our professional services environment, you tend to hire very intelligent people or people who've got a really interesting range of knowledge. So why would you want to just sit there and tell them what to do? They find they want autonomy, they want to use their knowledge, they want to use their mastery. Those are the things that inspire them and motivate them. And if they feel they're heavily constrained, it's the sorts of things that drive them away. And just sort of going back to a point I mentioned earlier about the ridiculous war for talent at the moment. You've got a lot of people applying at the lower end entry levels, sheer volume of people applying. But as you get towards the senior manager above level, there's a lot of people moving. There's a lot of poaching of people because everyone's desperate to get some good talent into their environment. And the attrition rates, it's been fascinating to see attrition rates going up over the last 6-7 months. People beginning to move from organisation to organisation, causing gaps. But then how do you encourage people to come in and encourage people to stay? Well, continual professional education has always been an attraction in our profession. People want to learn, they like to learn, they want to see a progression, they want to feel they're developing in some shape or form. So it's a hugely empowering way to bring people in, but it's also a really important thing to deliver on within an organisation, because if you're not learning in our world, you're probably getting quite dangerously behind. And you also are undoubtedly not tapping into the thing that probably is a key motivator for many of the people who joined the organisation in the first place. So coaching can be an element of that, but I think ongoing learning is a huge part of what needs to happen.
Jeremy, coaching, ongoing learning, developing people, losing people, gaining new people. Take your pick, as they say.
Yeah, all of those. All of the above. I'd agree with lots of what Francesca said. I think it's key at the moment to listen to what your people as well, and listen to what they're telling us and what they have to say. And equally important then is, having listened, make sure that you respond to that. Now, that's not always responding in the way that they think you should respond, but if you don't do that, you've got to have a very good reason and rationale for doing that. And Vineet talked about loved, respected, good work. Good work is an interesting one, and again, that is something for us that we are certainly listening to our people about when they tell us that clients are poor, or not responding, or not delivering good quality information, etc., etc. You know, we're coming down very hard on that now because of the impact that is having on our people, and that leads to them not enjoying their job, and then getting frustrated, and might ultimately lead to them leaving. So there's a whole piece around. I mean, as I said earlier, people is fundamental right at the front of our current strategy, but there's lots of aspects to that, whether it's learning and development, whether it's empowering them or making them feel more a part of the business, but all in all, just listening to them more and respecting their position and their desires from their career, what they want, what they're looking for, and just working with them along that. As Francesca said, retention is a real challenge, but if you can make some inroads into keeping your retention levels high, then that has a huge impact on the business.
Vineet, just picking up the word listening, if I may. You are, I'm not sitting at the top of a pyramid, but there are going to be, to bring some clarity to strategy and where the vision, where you're going, requires a lot of listening. How do you go about listening when you have so many people who are, I know they're all focused on the client first, and I respect that, but at the same time, the leader has a role to hear what's going on, I think, in the organization. And how do you build that part into your thinking?
Right. We have to be inspired by science. In science, what happens is that whenever you wish to do something new, innovate something new, you come up with a hypothesis. And then everybody in the science lab works very hard to try and prove the hypothesis right or wrong. And even if the hypothesis is proven wrong, it's a step up, and then you frame another hypothesis. Unfortunately, in corporate world or in everywhere else, the leaders do not come up with hypotheses. They come with announcements, strategies, pronouncements. And that is the reason that is not an area of listening. If they go and frame the question in the form that my hypothesis is that if we get to China or Brazil, we would be able to increase our margins or increase our market share. Or if we were able to drop our prices by 30%, we would be able to do this. Or if we are able to hire new batch of people from here, this will happen. This is my hypothesis. I'd like to hear your views on it. Now, the moment you use the word, this is my hypothesis or this is my assumption, people will give you their feedback. So listening is the first step to listening is framing the question. And the second step, as Jeremy rightly said, is that after you have heard them, do you respond to them? That I like Jim's idea, I like Mike's idea, I like Vinod's idea. And, unfortunately, I do not agree with what Sheila said. I do not agree with what Linda said. And because of all what I have heard, I think this is what we should do. So let's go ahead with this, because I gave you a hypothesis. I've heard all your views. This is my logic of accepting some of it and not accepting some of it. And based on it, let's get ahead. So that would be the whole cycle of listening, rather than saying this is the brilliant strategy and I'd like you to hear your views. Obviously, nobody is going to critique it because you've already put the word brilliant in front of your own strategy, and nobody's going to critique it. So stop pandering the fact that you want to listen.
Kate, you're obviously in a situation where your clients will come to you with, say, here is our strategy, and we'd like you to help us implement it. Exactly what Vineet said they shouldn't be doing, but let's assume that unfortunately is the case. How do you go about encouraging them to possibly build more listening into the equation? Or do you just have to say, well, if that's the strategy, okay, I'll do my best, but it probably won't work as well as it could?
No, I think some of the digital platforms we now have really enable businesses to listen and engage in ways that globally or on a large scale in ways that were much more challenging previously. There is no need just for the tell and command town hall now. And I think one thing I've seen a client of mine do really nicely last year was actually have a conversation with employees about what personally do you find most challenging about our strategy. So the strategy was set, but it created a really rich dialogue about, this strategy requires me to have conversations with clients I find daunting, or learn more about this sort of technology, or whatever it was. And to Vineet's point, it has to be genuine listening, but it really did, because people were personally willing to talk about where the strategy was creating a stretch for them. It was a really progressive conversation that everyone learned from, and also everyone felt listened to.
Brilliant. Well, I've really enjoyed this session today. 10 weeks, and it seems like we're back again. Any final thoughts from Francesca before we kind of call this one to close?
Oh, well, thank you very much for giving me the last word. Gosh, it does feel like 10 weeks has gone by in a flash, actually, but it also feels like a very long time too. Isn't it intriguing that, here we are, having all gone through 18 months, 2 years of the weirdest environment you could ever imagine. And it always comes back, doesn't it, to thinking about the people issues and looking to ways to be a better leader in the various environments that we're in. There's such a lot to take away from that. But I have to say, I am still a little bit blown away by the sheer scale, size, and just sheer charitable wonder of what Vineet has just done in India. If we could take even a fraction of that inspiration forward into our day, that would be wonderful, because I'm kind of thinking that scale of thinking about doing things that make the world better is something we all should try and take into our daily lives. So hugely inspiring to hear that.
I'd like to thank Vineet for inspiring us. You are a model of how it might be done, philanthropy in practice. Kate, for helping clients realize that imposing a strategy isn't always the best route and there are other ways of getting there. Jeremy, for his usual honesty and thinking about how he could do things better and how we perhaps help him slightly along the way. And Francesca, for, as always, being that ability to just summarize 2 or 3 key points and help us guide where the conversation then goes. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you again to my wonderful panel for today. And Jeremy and Francesca, I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Vineet, lovely to catch up after about 10 years, crazy. And Kate, thank you for coming, despite having, I know, had some troubles with the voice a few months ago, but sounding perfect today. So thank you for that as well. Bye for now, all.